Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22, joined by Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matterine, Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us for the show. That there was a lot of news, but not a lot of action last week. Nothing on the basketball courts as COVID-19 hits both the men and the women, and games are canceled. Let's start with the men first. The men have not played now in more than a week. Not scheduled to play until Saturday at Texas A&M. A couple of games canceled, and mainly it's because somebody within the program had it and the contact tracing was too close and they didn't have enough to play.
Well, and like we said at the beginning of basketball season, basketball was always a bigger worry than football. Once one guy in your program got it, you were probably in trouble. It doesn't matter whether that's a player, a coach, whoever it is, anybody who's around practice. Those guys are just in too close of quarters to not be able to contact trace pretty much the whole team once one guy has it. So you're done for a week. You missed 2 games based on what happened on Wednesday night. I'm not sure missing LSU was the worst thing in the world, but they did. And the problem now becomes like there's only 1 week built into this thing to make up games. So the next time you miss games, you're in a little trouble. I mean, we're in a situation where I think South Carolina is going to end up like 4-1 and be the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, from what I saw reported yesterday, the Tigers did get back on the court and they are practicing again, right?
Yeah, and they're scheduled to play Saturday at noon at Texas A&M. And, like everything, though, I mean, that's pending their test results this week and pending Texas A&M's test results, too. It goes both ways. We're seeing this. Missouri's not the only program. Like Gabe mentioned, South Carolina. Vanderbilt had a game day cancellation. They were supposed to play Tennessee on Tuesday and then again on Saturday, but they already had to postpone or cancel, whatever we're calling it, the Tuesday game. So I agree. I don't understand how they're going to make up these games. And what if it comes down to, well, you missed 2 or 3, you can only make up 1. You get to pick which one. I mean, Missouri would rather play Vanderbilt than LSU if they have to, or if they need the we're not calling it the RPI anymore, but the net. If you need that, then maybe it's more valuable to play LSU. So a lot of unanswered questions at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. And trying to figure it out is the tough point, and trying to figure out how this team's going to be coming back. The last time we saw them was that miserable second half against Mississippi State, Gabe, and they were terrible. And so maybe you could argue the break would help them, but I would imagine when you play like that, you want to get right back on the court.
Yeah, I think let's establish, first of all, that there's no like better or worse time to pause team activities for COVID. Like it's just bad. You don't want to have to do it. And the last time this team had a week off, they came out and looked pretty terrible against Bradley. But I'm not really here to entertain this year. Well, it was a tough scheduling thing. It's tough for everybody. Everybody's going through this. Texas A&M's not any good. They lost their last game by 24 points to South Carolina. If this team is anywhere near what they think it is and what fans want it to be, this is a game you go win. I mean, the Mississippi State game you probably should have won, but Mississippi State they're a decent team. Texas A&M's a bottom quarter of this league team. You go win this game if you are what you want people to, or what you want to tell people you are.
And ranked 17th right now, Dave, I would imagine that if they do go win, then they're starting to feel pretty good again.
Well, you should. I mean, there's not a whole lot of momentum, I don't think, from one game to the next when you're a team that's as up as down as Missouri. And there's especially not that kind of momentum this year when you have these long layoffs. But, anything can happen in a game. Like Mississippi State came back from that huge deficit against Missouri. You know what they did? Actually, against A&M the other night, they blew a 14-point second half lead. So it's from half to half. This is such a disjointed season. I think the narrative going in was all the veteran teams were going to be the ones that handle it better. Well, maybe that's true to some degree, but it's not like veteran teams have experienced something like COVID season before. So this is still all new for everybody. It's new for the coaches. You got plenty of time now to fix your mistakes that you made, but when you're not playing a game, it's still hard to make that adjustment when you need to just flip on a switch right away, like they'll need to on Saturday.
And let's talk about the women's program. The women's program had to shut down itself earlier this season. Now they're in Auburn this past weekend. They're about 3 hours till tip. and all of a sudden that game gets canceled. They've taken a charter flight. They've, stayed in a hotel. They've eaten food, and all of a sudden they have to turn around and come home. And it's their second break of the season. Now they're supposed to play tonight and against Ole Miss as we tape this on Thursday. This has been just another scheduling quirk for Robin Pinchton and her team.
And I give the SEC a lot of credit for how it's navigated things so far, but there has to be a better way than this. You can't go canceling things 2.5 hours before, or 3.5 hours before tip off when a team has already flown. I mean, do we remember when that happened in Tallahassee and the big, huge fit Dabo Sweeney threw? And, there's got to be a deadline. I mean, you've got to be able to time your testing in such a way that, hey, when this team is ready to take off, that means they're playing. And that was, I guess it was last Friday. There was clearly, nobody knew exactly what it was, but there was clearly a deadline for a decision on Missouri LSU, so that LSU did not get on a plane from Baton Rouge and get to Columbia and have no one to play. And oh, by the way, they actually were then able to get on a plane from Baton Rouge and go to Oxford and play Ole Miss. I don't know if it's disorganization on the women's side or look, people will get mad if it just doesn't matter as much. And so they're like, yeah, we can cancel this one 3 hours ahead of time. I don't know what it is, but I don't think that's fair to anybody to be doing that the morning you're supposed to play a 1:00 game.
But the crazy thing about that cancellation was Missouri not only traveled to Auburn Saturday night, they had a workout in Auburn Arena. So I know we don't have to get, crazy about COVID lingering on the surfaces or anything like that. I think we're kind of beyond that. But you bring in the team to work out there and to use the locker room, and then turns out you had enough of a positive case somewhere, you can't play the game the next day. That doesn't seem right. I'm sure there's an answer to this. We could maybe find out at some point, but Missouri also shouldn't have to pay the travel expenses to go down there, stay in a hotel, all the meals, the travel, the flight, everything, if the game doesn't happen 2 hours before tip-off, 3 hours or whatever. That's just, it's crazy. I agree with Gabe. There's got to be a better way to do this.
And now we have to ask the same question, Dave. How does this team rebound? This is not a veteran team. This is a team still trying to find itself.
Yeah, it really is. And they can't start thinking, if you're the men, you can kind of look at those net rankings and start thinking about the postseason a little bit, just okay, what does the team have to do to get wins enough to kind of get back to where they're, considered one of the better teams in the conference. The women's program better not be thinking about that at all. This is about just getting better, finding a conference win, doing some things right. They played that it was a shame they didn't get to play again after that Arkansas game, or at least haven't played much since then, because that was a game they had a chance, and they came back, and that's a really good Arkansas program, and they came up just short. But then they just have to have this limbo period where I guess Robin's probably you got to treat these practices like it's the games and get your team as ready as you possibly can against each other to go out and maybe play an opponent eventually.
So hopefully we have something to talk about next week on the hardwood. Let's switch to football, where Missouri did not play for the national championship, Gabe, but it did not matter who played because Alabama was obviously the best team in the country, and the SEC wins again.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama, if you look at just the 2017 recruiting class that I know people have written stories on this week, it's going to be like 9 or 10 first-round draft picks. They had the best quarterback in the country, the best running back in the country, the best wide receiver in the country, and the best offensive line in the country. So shocking, I know, that it turns out they had the best team in the country. Those poor tight ends, they didn't contribute anything, though.
Yeah, that's right. Now, Eli Drinkwitz in the past, Dave, has said, there's a gap between us and the top echelon. I mean, you hate to say it when you're talking Missouri, but you got to be realistic. It's quite a gap.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's right now, at least this season, there was a big gap between Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State. Now, we're kind of a prisoner of the moment. Last year, Alabama didn't even make the playoff. It was LSU we were talking about that was so dominant, and then they took a big step backward. I don't think Alabama's going to take a big step backward, but they do lose a lot from this team. But yeah, program-wise, there's 3 elite programs up there, and I don't think they're still all on the same level necessarily. Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, but Alabama's so much farther ahead. And then maybe next year it's Clemson. I still think Ohio State's a little bit behind those two just as far as what we've seen out of the last decade. But man, then there is a big gap between them and everybody else. I think Georgia's close. I think they could be right there next year. They've had two of the highest, I think the highest ranked recruiting classes in 19 and 20. At some point that's got to translate to something, you would think. But yeah, Eli's right. There's a big middle class in college football, and Missouri is right in the middle of it, I think.
One of the problems too, Gabe, and we've talked about it in the past, when you have a team or a couple teams like that, then the sport sort of becomes boring. And that's a bad news when you're trying to sell college football. If it's boring because it's the same teams all the time, people are going to check out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at this. And I do think college is different than the pros in that if you're a fan of an NFL team and you start a season and going, well, hey, the upside here is like 10-6. You might make the wild card round. I mean, you're going to lose, but you might make it. But hey, you get 8 fun Sundays with your buddies to tailgate and all that. That's one thing. But college football is so much more of an emotional thing. And we had this discussion on our message board. Somebody said, what's the point here in being a fan? Well, the point is you cheer for your school. You get 6-7 Saturdays to tailgate and hopefully again next year and hang out with your friends and make some memories. And you just kind of hope your team wins as many games as possible, but you do start the season understanding, hey, this probably isn't going to happen. And what you then hope for is that once every few years that everything lines up the way it did for Missouri in 2007 and 2013, and you've actually got a shot. Because to say Missouri will never have a shot, I mean, they've had a shot twice in 15 years, guys. So they can have a shot. Now, they're not going to have a shot every year. They have to have their best team, and other teams have to maybe be a little bit off and they have to get some breaks, but it is possible. It's just, look, there's 6 or 7 teams that start every season going, if we're not in the playoffs, this is a bad year. And then there's everybody else going, I don't know, I hope this is the one time in 9 years we have a shot.
Yeah, no doubt. Everybody wants to know about the defensive coordinator. We'll talk about that when we get to the tweets. But one thing that has been very active, Gabe, you know this, the transfer portal is very full these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I kind of like it. I know coaches hate it, but I think and like guys, you're seeing like Big Cat Bryant from Auburn, like really good players are just going, I've been here 4 years. I want to go check something else out. It's really entertaining. Look, I don't know if it's always going to be like this going forward. I assume this is probably the craziest one but we are entering a little bit of the free agency era in college football. It kind of takes me back to the days, Bo, I'm sure you'll remember this well, when like people were tracking Reggie White's movements across the country, right? Taking visits. That's what the transfer portal is now.
Thankfully, God told him to go to Green Bay.
Right.
But Dave, that thing, the portal, that's something that coaches probably have to check, I'm saying multiple times a day, don't you think?
Right. And they have to remember that door swings both ways. I mean, they can agonize over the fact that they might lose players that they're not expecting to lose, but you go out and get somebody else that their coach wasn't expecting to lose. So I think Missouri has done a pretty good job of that so far in the Drinkwitz regime. You're able to get, I know Damon Hazelton didn't have a great year, but it was a really celebrated move at the time. You get Michael Maietti, you get 2 years out of a grad transfer center that you probably didn't expect when you got him, definitely because there wasn't COVID yet. There wasn't this new rule. They go get a Mookie Cooper from Ohio State. We'll see. I mean, there's still plenty of time to add. I mean, we didn't even know some of these guys that they added, this time last year that ended up being starters and playing big roles on this team. So a lot can still happen.
Yeah. Any coach that complains too vocally about the transfer portal, I want to see him take no players out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, good point. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the defensive coordinator and who maybe they'll hire at Mizzou. You're watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Dave Matter, Gabe DeArmond, and I'm Bo Bayman. Glad you could join us. Don't forget, we're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter. We got lots of tweets this week and lots with one main theme. We have who's that new DC going to be? Do you all think Drink is going to make a big splash with the big name, says Eduardo. Who's the next DC, says Ms. Mike. Here's another one that says the rest of the SEC has hired their defensive coordinators. When are we going to do the same? Matthew says, any news on the defensive coordinators? So to our tens of millions of fans, would you like to break the news right here, boys?
I'd like to, sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I told Bo before the show, I've known since Monday. I was just waiting for Tiger Sidelines to start to tell people who it was. So
Yeah.
no, I think, and hopefully for my sake, Dave is running into the same thing. What I'm finding out is I think there's only really one guy that has any idea where this is going and who they want to talk to. And that one guy is Eli Drinkwitz, and he's not telling me. And I seriously mean, even I don't know that Jim Sturk is really even involved in this, other than to the point where Eli will come back and say, "Hey, this is my guy. Can we do this?" And obviously Sturk will have to approve at that point. But this is not like hiring a head coach. This is a one-man search committee. There are not daily rumors. Now, at some point, it may leak out, like from the other side. If a defensive coordinator interviews with Drinkwitz in the next few days, somebody that covers that program or a national guy may hear that. But from the Missouri side, there's just not really a daily thing to talk about, other than, yeah, I don't know, they're going to hire him one at some point.
And I don't get the sense this is going to happen very soon. Now, I say that this will happen within an hour, but I asked somebody the other day that should know if this is going to happen. And I used the word very soon. And all the answer I got was no. So who knows?
Yeah. And we don't even know. We can speculate the names, but we don't have any concrete names yet, do we?
No. And again, maybe won't, because look, we can all, and I think we all have thrown out, hey, here's some names that kind of make sense to me. But again, I've been doing this 18 years now, and I've never once had a coach ask me who I thought they should hire. That's never happened. So I don't anticipate it's going to happen this time. And every coach has a list, whether it's in his mind or written down, of, hey, here are guys I want to work with if I get the chance. I mean, I remember Barry Odom and Josh Heupel talking about back when they were assistants just starting out. They always said, hey, the first one of us that gets a head coaching job, we want to work together. Even some of the assistants on Drinkwitz's staff have said, back at Casey Woods was saying back at Auburn in 2010, we kept talking about, hey, who's going to win the race to be a head coach? And Eli did. And now, a couple of those guys are on his staff. That's the way it works. We don't know who he knows. I mean, we can figure out some of it just by where he's coached and who he's coached with, but he knows, I'm sure, plenty of people in this business that he's never been on a coaching staff with. Also, Jimmy Sexton knows a lot of people who is his agent.
Yeah. And how many times do we have to say, when we know, you'll know?
Yeah, we're not in the secret keeping business. If we are, we won't last very long.
Dan wants to know, with Mizzou basketball struggling so much from shooting beyond the three-point line the last few years, is there somebody coming in who can shoot and maybe shoot lights out?
I mean, I don't know, because none of them have played in college. I mean,
right.
A lot of people, and Mark Smith has been a good shooter, but everybody expected Drew Smith to be a better shooter and expected Torrance Watson to be a better shooter. And so, what a guy is doing against, competition in Springfield, Missouri, or anywhere else where they, Sean Dewar-Gordon coming in, what he's done against his high school competition, it kind of doesn't matter, because it's just such a different level.
Right. Right now, Drew Smith's about 38%. And Mark is about 39%. 40% is that benchmark where if you're shooting 40%, you're pretty good. So they've got a couple guys that can hit threes. The problem is they've got so many guys that take a lot of threes or take a decent amount that can't make them. And that's Xavier Pinson at 25%. Mitchell Smith, who shot really well at the end of last year, is not shooting well now. Kobe Brown's not shooting well. So I think it's just about making sure the right guys are taking those, and not the wrong guys. But as far as the future goes, remember Torrance Watson, he led the St. Louis area in scoring his junior and senior year. What does that translate to now? Now he's a guy that is a three-point shooter that can't play because he can't shoot threes. So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into what these guys do at the high school level.
That's the one part of fans' frustration with this season that I understand, though, is every time we ask Konzo about it, he's like, oh no, we want Mitchell Smith taking that shot. Kobe Brown can make that shot. Well, I believe he can. I've just almost never seen it happen in an actual game. So at some point you got to say, let's maybe not do this. Maybe pass that one up.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, Jared wants to know, sorry if I missed it, but do we know what the SEC plans are to make up basketball games? Any chance they try to do a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday just to try to fit everything in?
they've got this week built in before the conference tournament, but like teams like Missouri and South Carolina are, and now Vanderbilt, they already have that week filled. So
Yeah.
the only way you're going to be, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get in a situation where not everybody has 18 games, but the only way you could do it is to do something like that, like a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday in a week. And I don't really see a problem with that. I mean, you make them play 4 games in 4 days at the league tournament. You make them play 2 and 3 in the NCAA tournament. And I know that involves less travel, but if you have to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah, and it's not even a full week. The Missouri's last game is a Wednesday, March 3rd. Then the SEC tournament starts the following week, I think on Wednesday.
It usually starts on Wednesday. Yeah.
Wednesday. So you've got 6 days, and you're not going to, I don't know if teams aren't going to want to play back-to-backs. This is not the end. I mean, you can in the tournaments, obviously you have to then, but the travel involved, that's when you're in a bubble, you're all at the same place. You can play back-to-backs. I don't see how it's going to work out. I don't know how you can cram more than maybe 2, but not more than that.
But what about this idea? And I'm not sure, like take a team like Missouri. What if they're kind of on the bubble at the end, asking them to play 2 or 3 games and then go play the league tournament isn't really fair. But what about instead of all the travel, anybody that needs to make up games just goes to Nashville 6 days?
That's not a bad idea. Yeah.
I mean,
Not a bad idea. Hey, John wants to know, what are your expectations for Drinkwitz filling out the 2021 roster? See needs for wide receiver, offensive line, and linebacker.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Those are probably the positions, and transfer. I wouldn't be surprised if every spot left is a transfer, honestly. And these teams are also, don't forget, this is the first wave of this. More guys will transfer after spring football. I think everybody's going to leave a couple spots open in their class for,
Right.
May and June.
Dave.
I could see, I mean, I don't know if he wants to, but do you want a running back? I mean, Larry Roundtree, he carried the ball 209 times this year. That's, I think, what Drinkwitz likes is one guy that just a hammer out there. I don't think they have that on the roster right now. You can have a committee approach, but man, you don't have anybody like him I think you have guys that can replace, a Tyree Gillespie and a Larry Bourne. You've got guys you move in, but you don't have a Roundtree. So I'd be curious if you leave that open for a transfer.
Last one comes from Mongo, and he says, is the plan to redshirt Macon?
I mean, it almost has to be, right? By the time the season starts next year, he's 2 years removed from playing a game. And the quarterback you had was the SEC freshman of the year. I know we fall in love with the next guy, and Tyler Macon may end up being a phenomenal football player in college, but I think it almost has to be the plan.
I think you go into see what he can do. And if it's not close, then make that decision, but always have him ready, because is his upside greater than Brady Cook? I don't know if we know that. I mean, they'll know it after spring ball and preseason camp if they have to get him ready. But just the way this is all working out, Bazelak's only going to have he's going to be a redshirt freshman next year, and Macon's going to be a true freshman. So there's not going to be that gap separating them eligibility wise that you normally would have in this situation. So yeah, it's a little bit of a puzzle that they're going to have to solve. But I think the competition will probably take care of itself. I mean, if you see, hey, he's not close to being able to be the starting quarterback for this team, or even be the backup should Connor get hurt, then the answer is right there for you.
All right. Thanks for all those tweets. We're at Tiger Sidelines. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some things that went on the mat. We'll have wrestling and gymnastics when we come back right here on Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Gabe DeArmond, Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman, all working remotely as we have for a while. And on the mat, number 9 wrestling team continued its great start to the season, defeating Central Michigan 30-6 and Wyoming 29-3. Mizzou now 5-0 on the season. The dual win against Wyoming at the Hearn Center was career win number 300 for head coach Brian Smith. And that is really the topic that came out from this weekend. I mean, he's been here 23 years, Dave, but he's been phenomenal for that program.
Yeah, I was just trying to think when I saw that stat, okay, who are the greatest Mizzou coaches of all time? We could do a whole show on this in any sport. And there aren't guys out there who have, or women who have won like multiple national titles. We just don't have that here. He's got to be right up there. I mean, he's right up there with Norm Stewart. He's right up there with Don Farrow. I mean, there's some track coaches, there's baseball coaches that have done great things back long before our time. But man, Brian has to be right up there at the top.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Over the 5 duels, Tigers outscoring opponents 173-21. Big duel or a tri-meet this week. It's number 9 Mizzou. It is also number 20 Northern Iowa, number 10 Iowa State, and number 11 Arizona State. That's up in Ames. It'll be all day Sunday. So we'll get a good test for the Tigers this weekend. The number 16 gymnastics team opened the season on the road at number 10 Georgia. Tigers lost 196.150 to 194.250. But the highlight was Sienna Schreiber claiming the beam title with a career best 9.9. And 5 different Tigers made their collegiate debuts. So it tells you that Shannon Welker's team is young, and still being young, they're ranked 16th.
That seems good. That's my analysis.
Great analysis.
Hashtag
That's all
analysis. Up next, Tigers host number 6 Alabama on Friday, and the meet will be aired live on SEC Network Plus. Last thing before we go, do we see basketball this weekend for both the men and the women?
I mean, can we tape this on Saturday at 11:30 in the morning? From Missouri side, I think so. I mean, Missouri's men just got over kind of having to go on pause. I don't see that happening again. But what happens in College Station, right? And
Right.
from the women's side, yeah, you would think they'll be okay, but who knows?
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll talk about it next week. For Brian and Matt behind the scene, for Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks as always for joining us on Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22. We'll see you next week, everybody.